This is Danielle Beach-Oswald Immigration Law. Today we're going to talk about the CARES Act, and the stimulus is part of that, and the unemployment is also part of that. And does it affect you if you're a green card holder or if you are going to get your green card? So we're going to talk about all these intricacies. The CARES Act is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. We're also going to talk a little bit about the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act is not law. That's very important to know because it's only gone through the House so far. The Senate and Mitch McConnell has said it is not going to pass. If it passes, it's great for immigrants because it adds a lot of new benefits that weren't covered under the CARES Act. So first of all, let's talk about the cash stimulus. So you all know what the cash stimulus is because you've been calling me and asking me questions about it. It's that $600 check, or if you're, it's $1,200 for each adult and $500 for each child member in the family. So what are the two requirements? One, you have to be a permanent resident. Two, you have to have a Social Security card. What if you don't have a Social Security card and you only have an ITIN number? ITIN number is a tax ID number, and that unfortunately does not qualify. So if you have an ITIN number and not a Social Security number, you should not be receiving a stimulus check. However, there is an exception if one of the two members, the husband or the spouse, has served in the military. That is the only exception. It is not subject to the new public charge rule of February 24, 2020, which now you have to file a 99444. So that is a very long and complicated form. You don't want to fill that out by yourself. Make sure you talk to a lawyer. But the problem is with the cash stimulus, it's based on income. It's not based, you're not requesting it, so it's not subject to the public charge rule. It is not subject because it's based on your income. And again, there's a problem with it though. What if you have a Social Security number, your husband has a Social Security number, but one of your children only has an ITIN number? Unfortunately, it then disqualifies everybody in that family, and nobody should be receiving that stimulus check. The stimulus check, the purpose of that is to increase spending in the general economy and to give a boost to the economy. Also, if you're dependent on someone else's taxes and you're, say, the child over 21, then you are not also eligible for that stimulus check because you're not going to get one. So the other family may be, but not you. So let's talk a little bit about unemployment insurance. So unemployment insurance extends existing unemployment insurance for 13 weeks. Everybody knows what that is. You get that $600 check when you apply for unemployment. And if you're a family of four, you're probably getting $3,400 a month. If you're one person, 24. That's a lot of money for some people. That's a lot of money if you haven't been making much money or have been making less than that. So the problem is, what's your incentive to go back to work? That's the problem. So who qualifies for unemployment insurance? Well, basically the program is designed to supplement existing unemployment insurance for those who either aren't eligible or have exhausted their employment benefits. So the people who are eligible must have a valid employment authorization and be eligible under what's called PRUCOL or under color of law. So what if your work authority is expiring and there are delays and you can't get a new one? Unfortunately, this is not covered by the Act. It does not do that automatic extension for 180 days, nor does it automatically covered on the COVID. However, the HEROES Act does address that issue. So there are some issues on that. So healthcare, let's talk a bit about healthcare. How does it change that? So the healthcare, first of all, gives you free testing, free access to treatment, and prevention. Now, those are all covered under COVID, and they are not subject to the public charge rule. Again, not. So you can get those. The problem is it's not going to cover necessarily the cost for the treatment. It's also, you have to look at state by state, because the Medicaid eligibility, some states have included COVID-19 under their medical emergency Medicaid. If it hasn't been included by the state on the medical emergency, then probably you're not going to be eligible if you're uninsured. Now, again, the HEROES Act does address that. So let's talk a little bit about the HEROES Act. So the HEROES Act would be great if it passed. It's a wonderful name, and what it stands for is Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act. That's a mouthful. So what does it do? Well, it does 5 different things. 1, it does allow for virtual oath ceremonies for naturalization. That means if you were one of those people who missed your naturalization interview in March or April, you're now going to be covered because you'll have that virtual. And so that means you'll be a citizen by November and can vote. That's a big deal. Second thing is it extends employment authorization for TPS and DACA holders. That's, again, a huge amount of people. So that's a big deal. Thirdly, it expands Medicaid coverage for testing and treatment to cover people for coronavirus regardless of your immigration status. That was not covered by the CARES Act. So regardless of your immigration status, that's a big deal. Fourthly, it gives that stimulus, cash stimulus benefit for immigrants who have only the ITIN number. So remember I said if you were in this family and you had only the ITIN, you didn't have a green card, and you didn't have a social security card, you were not eligible? Well, now you would be eligible, because if the HEROES Act passes, it doesn't matter if you have the ITIN, and you're not going to disqualify the whole rest of the family. That's a huge deal. Lastly, on detention, it does a number of things. So it does help get people released, especially if they have medical issues. Supposedly, the major exception is the fact that if you are subject to mandatory detention, that means if you have already been ordered deported by a judge or you have a final order, you're not going to be eligible for that. However, we found with a case which was done with the ACLU and Project for National Lawyers Guild that they were able to help us with a restraining order and a preliminary injunction to get our client released from Worcester County, even though he had a final order. And that was great, because that meant he was able to also get out. Now, there were a lot of other things that helped with that, and he did have some health issues, but that's a big provision. The other thing that you've probably often heard on the news is that there's no soap, no sanitization. This provides for people who are in detention getting those free supplies. That's a big deal, especially, if they can't afford it. It also gives them access to free phone calls and ability to call their lawyers. So this is what you call a bailout package. HEROES Act is a $3 billion bailout package. The Act itself is over 1,800 pages. And even though it sounds wonderful for you, it's unlikely to become law, because Mitch McConnell has said, no way, no how, this is going to pass the Senate. So that's where we are now on these benefits. There are pros and cons on many of the things I've talked about. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding this stimulus package. The package itself, with the stimulus and the unemployment, frankly, it's meant that the recession has been much less. There's also been states like Michigan who have 22% of unemployment, as opposed to North Carolina that has 12%. So again, it's a state by state in many of these situations that need to be reviewed for benefits, especially for the Medicaid provisions. So with that, I'm happy to answer some questions. So let's see if we have some questions here. Just 1 second. Okay. Why, if I haven't gotten my check yet, but I do receive a letter from IRS signed by the president saying that they did direct deposit the $1,200. So I think that's saying that you haven't received the check either by direct deposit or by check, but you received a letter from the IRS saying you were going to receive it. That would be unusual because usually they're just sending it, but it could be that it got delayed or there's been address changes or something like that. So I would definitely contact the IRS on that. Now, again, you're not requesting this check. It's an automatic. It's a means-tested benefit, so it's not subject to the public charge because it's not something that you've requested. It's an emergency availability. So there's many reasons why it's not subject to the public charge, and CIS has said it's not subject to the public charge. Next question, if I don't have a Social Security number, can I get a stimulus check? Well, the answer to that is under the CARES Act, no. And you may affect the rest of your family. If the HEROES Act passes, then if you have an ITIN number, then you would be. But it only takes one family member in the household, and I think that that's defined as child or parent. It's probably not going to include all the grandparents or aunts and uncles or other people like that who live. It would be people who would be covered basically on your tax returns. So those people would all have to have permanent residency and Social Security card number under the stimulus or CARES Act. If I'm an asylum applicant and I filed my taxes in 2019, does that mean I should get my stimulus check? Depends on how much you make. So it's based on income. So yes, if you made the requisite amount in income, you should receive it. Now, it's not going to be the same amount necessarily for everybody based on income. So yes, that would be something you would get. So any other questions that you have for me? This is sort of a developing area, so we haven't got all the answers yet. It's also very voluminous to read, so again, we don't have everything that we could have. But another question, do I have to pay the stimulus back? No, you don't have to pay it back, and it's not subject to the public charge, so it's yours to spend. If you don't want to spend it, I guess you can keep it. But the purpose of the whole stimulus check was to spend to help restaurants and help other small businesses and help the economy get a kickstart. If we collect the stimulus check, does it have any effect on our immigration matters? It should not affect the public charge rule at all that came out in February 24. Now, if something changes on that, they've said it doesn't, but if something changes on that because they're proposing to have another stimulus check, that may have different requirements. But this particular stimulus check is not subject to the public charge rule. You do not have to give it back. So if my husband petitioned for me and he lost his job and he filed for unemployment, will that affect our I-130 petition? No, that's it. The great thing about this is it should not affect. However, I'm assuming that the husband is a U.S. citizen and he's filed for unemployment, but if you're not, PRUCAL, you're not going to be eligible for it. So You would have, he would be eligible. He would not, it would not affect your green card. Other benefits, again, check very, very carefully, because we're only talking about the stimulus check and unemployment. Other benefits do affect public charge, such as food stamp, SSI, other benefits, even sometimes emergency medical benefits. So again, you have to really look at that checklist of what affects it and what doesn't, but these two things do not. So I want to thank you for listening. I want to, if you felt this was helpful, share it with somebody, give it a thumbs up or like, and if you feel that you have more questions that you'd like answered, just give us a call, schedule an appointment, or send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer it. Thank you for listening today, and have a good weekend.